Every time prices creep upward, a small piece of your financial freedom slips away. Groceries, rent, fuel, everything moves higher bit by bit. And if your paycheck feels like it stretches less each year, you're not imagining it. You're witnessing one of the quietest and most consistent transfers of wealth in history, a cycle that repeats with every generation. Because inflation isn't just rising prices. It decides who gets to shape the future. For most people, inflation feels like chaos. Bills rising, savings shrinking, and life becoming unpredictable. But for the powerful, inflation isn't chaos. It's structure. It's strategy. It's how nations finance wars without raising taxes. It's how companies wipe away old debt. And it's how the wealthy watch their assets multiply while everyone else falls behind. So the real question isn't why inflation happens, but why we keep allowing it. To understand that, we go back to a time when inflation was treated like a national threat, not an economic goal. In the early 1900s, most countries were tied to gold. Every currency note represented metal locked in a vault. That made money scarce, steady, and honest. Governments couldn't print their way out of trouble. If they ran deficits, they either taxed more or admitted failure. Inflation was rare, usually caused by war or disaster. The idea of governments choosing inflation was unthinkable. Then everything fell apart. The Great Depression of the 1930s shattered the belief in stable money. Prices collapsed, wages disappeared, banks went under. The problem wasn't inflation, it was deflation. Money gained value over time, so nobody spent it. Debt grew heavier every day. The economy seized up. This crisis changed how leaders thought about money forever. After World War II, governments faced mountains of debt. Some owed more than double their GDP. Paying it back honestly was impossible. So they didn't. They let inflation quietly shrink it. During the 1950s and 60s, global debt fell, not because economies became richer, but because the value of the debt slowly dissolved. Inflation had become a useful tool. Then 1971 changed everything. President Nixon cut the dollar's link to gold. It was supposed to be temporary. Money stopped being a measure of value and became whatever government said it was. From that moment on, money was backed only by confidence, not metal you could hold. Inflation became part of the design. Now money could be created endlessly as long as people believed in the system. Governments could borrow forever. Banks could create infinite credit. And investors learned a simple truth. Inflation hurts savers but rewards borrowers. Inflation reverses the logic of money. Hold cash, you lose. Hold debt, you win. A big mortgage feels heavy today, but in 20 years of inflation, it feels small. Meanwhile, houses, stocks, and land soar in price. Inflation shrinks debt and boosts assets. It quietly widens the gap between rich and poor. Not because of conspiracy, because of mathematics. Our economy runs on credit, and credit only works if the future dollar is worth less than today's. Without inflation, the entire system would collapse under the weight of its own debt. So governments, banks, and corporations all silently agree. Better to let the currency lose a little value each year than let the economy crash. But what about everyday people? Wages rarely keep up. Prices rise faster than salaries. Savings lose value. And those who don't own assets, who live on wages instead of capital, find themselves forever running in place. Inflation rewards ownership, not labor, and it punishes caution. Saving becomes a slow loss. A 3% interest rate means nothing when inflation is 6%. Meanwhile, people who borrow to buy assets watch those assets climb. This is not luck, it's the system. Inflation redistributes wealth upward. Those who get new money first, banks, corporations, governments, benefit before prices adjust. By the time money reaches ordinary people, it's already worth less. This is the Cantillon Effect, discovered 300 years ago, still true today. After 1971, the entire structure of money flipped. Overspending was rewarded. Governments no longer feared deficits. Savings lost their importance as credit took over. Inflation kept everything glued together. By the 1980s and 90s, central banks perfected the act, targeting 2% inflation as if it were a scientific ideal. Over decades, that cuts the dollar's value in half. But while the middle class pays more for groceries, the rich watch their assets double. The wealthy don't fear inflation. They use it. They own the assets that rise. They own the debt that gets cheaper. Inflation becomes their silent business partner. Governments love it too, because inflation shrinks public debt without anyone noticing. Deflation is their worst nightmare. It makes debt heavier, exposes bubbles, and bankrupts borrowers. Inflation hides the cracks. Banks, they adore inflation. Rising prices force people to invest, borrow, and chase returns, fueling the entire financial machine. And the further down the ladder you are, the less control you have. Wages move slow, assets move fast, debt can either ruin you or make you wealthy, depending on what kind of debt you hold. Then came 2008. Instead of resetting the system, governments pumped trillions into banks and financial markets. Asset prices recovered instantly. Stocks and housing soared. Wages didn't. Quantitative easing masked a massive wealth transfer from the bottom upward. Then came 2020. Money was injected into households, demand exploded, supply collapsed, and inflation surged. Once again, the rich benefited most. Because inflation doesn't choose winners, it multiplies the power of those already ahead. History repeats the pattern. Weimar Germany, the middle class destroyed, industrialists enriched. Post-war Britain, national debt erased, savers ruined. 1970s America, commodities and real estate made fortunes. 2020s, billionaires gained trillions, families fell behind. Different eras, same mechanism. Inflation is the oldest, most respectable wealth transfer on earth. We blame greed, politics, supply chains, but they're symptoms. The root cause is structural. Our economy runs on ever-expanding credit, and credit needs inflation. Even when central banks fight inflation, their real goal isn't to remove it, only to control it. Because if inflation truly hit zero, growth would stop. The system would stall. The war on inflation is theater, a balancing act between looking strong and keeping the machine running. Inflation doesn't just change numbers, it changes behavior. It makes people spend now, instead of planning ahead. It punishes patience and rewards risk. It creates a population that is always consuming, always borrowing, always chasing stability they can't quite reach. Inflation becomes a mindset, a culture. We call it growth, we call it prosperity, but underneath it's a cycle of devaluation that has powered economies for centuries. Once you notice it, you can't unsee it. Inflation is how power measures time. It rewards people who live in the future, borrowers, investors, institutions. It punishes people who live in the present, workers and savers. And it leaves behind those who believe money holds the same value forever. That's why the wealthy embrace inflation, and you don't. To them it's not theft, it's strategy. Every generation faces the same truth. Money's value is never fixed. The real question is whether you're the one losing it, or the one deciding what it's worth. Inflation didn't appear by accident. It's the natural outcome of a world that wants everything now and pays later. It fuels debt, sustains empires, and keeps the system expanding, often at the expense of the people inside it. And yet without it, everything breaks. Deflation crushes borrowers. Banks collapse. Trade freezes. Inflation keeps the gears turning, no matter who gets squeezed. So when someone says a little inflation is good, ask yourself, good for who? Not the worker saving for a home, not the retiree with a fixed income, but the people who already own the home, the ones who built a system designed to rise forever. Inflation isn't a flaw in capitalism. It is capitalism, running at full speed, uphill, with your wallet in its pocket. Inflation isn't the fire, it's the oxygen, and the world we built can't breathe without it. If this changed your perspective, hit subscribe. History holds the answers, and I'll show you where to find them.